Okay, we'll start now. So in this class, students, what we are going to do is we will discuss the second paper of philosophy optional of this year's exam and section A of that paper, basically socio-political philosophy. As you know, in past previous classes, I've already discussed first paper, both Western philosophy part and Indian philosophy part, and also uh, I have also analyzed in detail the this year's exam paper, and also taken another class how to attempt the questions, particularly how to write good answers, what should be the constituent of a good answer. So today we are going to discuss in that series only the section A of paper 2, that is socio-political philosophy part of this year's exam. So now I will share the uh, PDF, and then we can discuss questions one by one, so that I will also try to explain the answers and also try to give the model answers. So this is the exam paper. First question, as you know, is basically uh, contains 5 parts, 10 marks each, 150 words. This year's characteristics of this year paper I've already explained earlier. It was more comparative, more critical. It was basically having more indirect questions. So accordingly, this paper, I mean, this part of the paper is also like that only. So we'll try to understand how best we can, what is the directive of each question, how best we can take up and write the question so that our answers fetch better marks. So part A of question 1, I will read it. Corrupt practices reveal an inherent tension between particularistic and universalistic normative standards. Do you agree with this statement? Give reasons and justification for your answer. So now the directive of the question is, our first part of the question is, do you agree with this statement? So you have to state clearly whether you agree, whether you disagree, whether you partly agree, whether you partly disagree. And then you have to also give reasons and justification for whatever you answer for that. So accordingly, now the answer starts. I agree that corrupt practices reveal an inherent tension between particularistic and universalistic standards. So this is basically first part of the questions, because whether you agree, yes, I agree that corrupt practices reveal an inherent tension between particularistic and universalistic standards. Now we'll just try to explain what is particularism and what is universalism. Particularism is rooted in loyalty to family, caste, or patrons, while universalism emphasizes impartial rules of justice, equality, and objectivity. So basically, these two terms we are trying to explain so that the examiner clearly understands that we also, I mean, the examinee understands the concepts very clearly, and then accordingly he is answering. The clash is evident across domains in education. Now we are trying to explain giving various examples how this clash is there between uh, universal values and particular values. So clash is evident across domains. But first is education. Parents using influence for admission undermines merit. Then business, cronyism overrides fair competition. Then in politics, vote bank promises privilege groups over constitutional equality. Then in public administration also, scandals such as recruitment irregularities in states show how nepotism or bribery allow particularistic pressures to displace universal norms of merit and fairness. So this is various examples we have given how this clash between two values take place and why we are favoring universalism. As Talcott Parsons, one of the social scientists, uh, noted, modern institutions demand universalistic orientation. Once particularism dominates, legitimacy collapses. This is what Talcott Parsons has said. And you see, in every answer, you have to give some reference or some quote also to the extent possible, if you remember. So accordingly, the relevant quote here has been given. Then further also, ethically, corruption violates Kant's universality principle and contradicts Gandhi's insistence on satya and impartial duty. So again, these two uh, thinkers have been quoted here. Thus, corrupt practices inherently expose this normative tension, and genuine integrity requires that universalistic standards prevail to sustain fairness, trust, and constitutional values. So this completes the answer. So here we have explained the concepts, then we have tried to give our own opinion, and then we have to support our own opinion. We have given some examples, and then also we have quoted some thinkers, standard thinkers, so that that supports the answers and strengthens it further. Now we'll go to part B. How does gender as a social construct affects individuals' opportunities, rights, and access to resources? Critically discuss. Now, this question is basically if you have studied gender in society or gender issues in society, definitely I mean, this is a direct kind of question because most of the students do also prepare for essay also for this question. So you may be understanding that this is a very, very direct kind of question, but here what has been critically discussed. So you have to also give some uh, uh, balanced critical evaluation also, positive and negative points, and try to conclude accordingly. And then all this has to be written in very, very limited 150 words so that uh, you don't overstretch the answer or you don't miss the bus as far as the impressing the examiners are concerned. Now let us start. Gender as a social construct, as emphasized by Simon de Beauvoir. So this is again thinker, sociologist. One is not born but rather becomes a woman. Refers to roles shaped by society rather than biology. Judith Butler argues gender is performative, created by repeated norms. These constructs influence opportunities, rights, and resources. One more thing I just want to tell, again repeat, earlier also I have told, uh, whichever words or terms or names you want to underline, in my presentation I have made it bold so that you will understand actually you need to underline to attract the attention of examiner. So these constructs influence opportunities, rights, and resources. Women are confined to caregiving, restricting education, and leadership, while men face breadwinner stereotypes, limiting emotional freedom. So now both sides we are talking. The stereotypes are not only for women but for men also. And then accordingly, men also face problems. That's what has been mentioned. While men face breadwinner stereotypes, limiting emotional freedom. Historically, women lacked inheritance until, I mean, Indian scenario, because in socio-political philosophy, many times you have to give Indian examples and Indian scenario you have to describe. So accordingly, it has been done. Historically, women lacked inheritance until Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, and female farmers still own under 15% of land in this country. So again, this is again a problem. I mean, it's a property. I mean, it's not equally divided between women, and even though the legally this has been made, provision has been made, but still female farmers still own under 50% of land. Critically, despite schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, this is Government of India scheme and good scheme, of course, and global accords like CEDA 1970. This is one accord which was done in 1979. Wage gaps, glass ceilings, and violence endure. Amartya Sen's capability approach highlights deficits in real freedoms, while Kimberley Crenshaw's intersectionality shows caste and class magnify this disadvantage. Now, this is a very, very important point, you see. So, women is anyway disadvantaged grouped, but when this clash or this intersects with caste and class, this whole disadvantage is magnified, because women of a lower caste and women of lower class are going to face more problem, more disadvantages than compared to other women. So this also has been mentioned. B.R. Ambedkar warned that true democracy requires gender justice, yet patriarchal norms persist. Thus, gender constructs perpetuate inequality. Dismantling them is vital to realize constitutional guarantees of Articles 14 and 15, ensuring equality and non-discrimination. So here constitutional provisions also have been quoted. So, I mean, in socio-political philosophy, definitely you have to quote constitutional provisions or other statutory provisions, whichever are relevant, or government schemes, particularly in Indian context, you have to do. Now, part C will go, is the idea of secularism necessarily related to idea of religious pluralism? Now, this again is a direct question. Is the idea of secularism necessarily related to idea of religious pluralism? Now, first you have to answer and then you have to discuss. So discuss means, again, you have to broadly, I mean, you have to tell almost 360-degree of this whole idea, but then first you have to tell, is that idea necessarily related to that idea? So again, the answer starts like this. The idea of secularism is closely related to religious pluralism, though not in a necessary or identical sense, as both address the management of religious diversity in society. So this, uh, this answers the first part. Is the idea is related? So it is being said that it's related, but not necessarily or ident. Because your question is secularism necessarily related? So what we are trying to say is, no, it's not necessarily related, though it's closely related. So that's what is being said. Now we'll try to explain what is secularism or pluralism. Secularism ensures state neutrality and equal treatment of religions, while pluralism emphasizes coexistence and mutual respect. So these are two different terms and have different meaning also. But yes, they are closely related, but not necessarily 100% related. That's what has been easy. In practice, secularism often sustains pluralism. In India, Articles 25 to 28 of Constitution of India guarantee religious freedom, and Rajiv Bhargava's model of principal distance allows state engagement to promote equality while respecting diversity. Gandhi's Sarvodharm Sambhav also linked secularism with interfaith harmony, while Ambedkar stressed constitutional morality as the foundation of equality across communities. In contrast, France Leicester insists on strict separation, which sometimes restricts feasible expressions of pluralism. However, the two are not inseparable. So this again being uh, explained. A homogeneous society may be secular without pluralism, while a culturally tolerant society may display pluralism without formal secularism. Thus, the multi-religious societies like India, or in multi-religious societies like India, secularism is practically indispensable for sustaining religious pluralism. So this is in Indian context, conclusion has been said. Now we'll go to 1D, comment on Plato's critique of democracy. Now this is a very, very different kind of question, because usually the students will not prepare for this question. But if you are a philosophy student and you have already read Plato in paper 1, then perhaps you will remember what he said about democracy, and then accordingly you have to answer. But here, comment on Plato's critique of democracy. So first thing, you have to write exposition, that is Plato's critique of democracy, and then also you have to mention a few points for evaluating that. So that's what you have to write. So we'll start the answer. In the book called Republic, Plato critiques democracy as degenerate regime in his cycle: aristocracy, timocracy, oligarchy, democracy, and tyranny. So this is the cycle of Plato's sequence. So for him, aristocracy is best and tyranny is worst. And democracy falls in that series number 2 from below. So democracy, he argues, glorifies excessive freedom and equality. That's what Plato says. Eroding hierarchy and discipline. The democratic man, swayed by shifting desires, lacks rational stability uh, through the ship of state metaphor. This is metaphor which Plato has given. Plato warns that entrusting rule to the ignorant masses is like sailors overruling the skilled navigator. He insists that authority should lie with the philosopher king. So this is the main concept of Plato, that philosopher king should be there to rule, who alone grasps the good. Left unchecked democracy, liberty, he claimed, degenerates into faction of tyranny under a demagogue. So this is what Plato's view on democracy, or Plato's critique of democracy, you can say. Now, this view needs to be evaluated because this is one-sided view, and perhaps in modern times we don't agree with this view. So accordingly, critically, Plato anticipated modern worries about populism, yet ignored the stabilizing role of education and institutions. Aristotle endorsed a mixed polity. Tocqueville warned of majority tyranny. Popper condemned Platonic elitism, while Mill saw democracy as a fostering liberty and civic growth. In India, Ambedkar envisioned democracy as a moral order. Thus, now this is the conclusion. So, this is basically critical evaluation of the Plato's view, and now the conclusion. Thus, while Plato's critique is insightful, modern democracy, anchored in rights, deliberation, and checks, remains the best means to balance freedom with order. So, this is what we can conclude. Now, we'll go to part E, that is last part of question 1. Discuss the salient features of equality according to J.S. Mill. Now, this most of you might have read while preparing. So, accordingly, this also is a direct question. But again, discuss word or discuss directive gives you scope for writing a few critical views or a few critical comments also. So, now let us go like that. For J.S. Mill, equality is the cornerstone of liberty, liberal thought, articulated in On Liberty, that is his book, and Considerations of Representative Government, this is again second book, and third book, Subjection of Women. So these three books he has elaborated his view on equality. First, equality means equal consideration of interests. Each individual has moral worth irrespective of birth, class, or gender. Secondly, Mill stresses equality of opportunity, especially in education and public life. He rejected equality of outcome, holding that differences in talent and effort should be rewarded, but artificial barriers must be dismantled. His defense of women's rights, influenced by Harriet Taylor, condemned subordination as unjust and socially wasteful. Third point of his equality view, political equality. Every citizen deserves a voice, though Mill proposed plural voting to blend universal suffrage with competence. Finally, equality is tied to liberty and utility, echoing Bentham's utilitarianism. It enhances individuality and the greatest happiness. Critically, now we'll have a very brief critical view on what Mill has said on equality. Plural voting was elitist, but Mill's framework laid the liberal foundation of modern democratic equality, later developed by John Rawls and Amartya Sen also. Now we'll go to second question. Second question, first part A, as you know, 20 marks question. We have to apply in about 300 words. So present a detailed account of the debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar on the issue of caste discrimination. So, I mean, this is very, very important question, and almost every student prepares it. So, because this debate is also very, very interesting debate as far as socio-political philosophy is concerned. So, but here present a detailed account. So, we have to basically write in detail. As 300 words, you can anyway write. So, both views are both, then critical evaluation, then final conclusion also. All those things needs to be written. Now, let us try to see what can be the structure and the format of the question and what can be the content. The debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar on caste discrimination remains one of the most significant intellectual confrontations in modern India. Both opposed untouchability but differed fundamentally on the nature of caste and remedies of social justice. Now, we'll deal with Gandhi's view and Ambedkar's view, and then we'll try to further elaborate. Gandhi's view. Gandhi distinguished Varna from Jati. He defended Varna as a natural division of labor based on guna, that is qualities, rather than birth, but condemned untouchability as a blot on Hinduism. For him, caste could be reformed through moral persuasion, repentance, and spiritual awakening. So this is Gandhi's view, not coercive law. He renamed untouchables as Harijans and urged upper caste to purify Hinduism from within. Gandhi sought unity of Hindu society to strengthen the nationalist movement. Now, what is Ambedkar's view? Ambedkar rejected Gandhi's distinction, holding Varna and Jati inseparable and sanctified by texts like Manusmriti. In Annihilation of Caste, that is a book of Ambedkar, he declared caste incompatible with liberty, equality, and fraternity. Principles he drew from Buddha and modern democracy. For Ambedkar, reform required legal safeguards, political rights, and socio-economic restructuring. He demanded separate electorates for the depressed classes to secure dignity and representation. So this is Ambedkar's view. Now, in this Pune Pact of 1932 is very, very important milestone. So that also we need to mention here, because that is peak of the conflict between Gandhi and Ambedkar. So the conflict peaked when Gandhi opposed separate electorates fasting unto death. Ambedkar, under pressure, signed the Pune Pact, agreeing to reserve seats in joint electorates. He later called it a coerced compromise. So this is Pune Pact between Ambedkar and Gandhi. Critical appraisal of this view. Gandhi's approach reflected reformist conservatism, risking preservation of caste in a purified form. Ambedkar's stance was radical and emancipatory, culminating in his conversion to Buddhism and his insistence on constitutional morality as the foundation of democracy. Scholars like Arundhati Roy and Christopher Jeffrellet highlight his transformative vision, while Ashish Nandi views Gandhi's reconciliatory ethos as preventing rupture. Now, the conclusion. The debate revealed two paradigms, Gandhi's moral reform and Ambedkar's structural annihilation. Ultimately, Ambedkar's vision triumphed through the constitution, ensuring that enduring justice rests on rights, representation, and constitutional morality. So this is Ambedkar's view, and this prevails as of now, and this is also correct view as the concluding remarks we can write. Now, part B, evaluate Marxism as a political ideology. This is 15 marks question. We need to write in about 25 words. And the question is, evaluate Marxism as a political ideology. So first, we have to describe Marxism as a political ideology. We have to give the exposition, and then we have to critically evaluate it, and finally we have to conclude. So now let us see. Marxism, developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, is both a theory of history and political ideology. The books Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, Marx presented historical materialism, arguing that economic structures and class struggle drive social change. Politically, Marxism calls for abolition of private property, collective ownership of production, and ultimately a classless, stateless society. The dictatorship of the proletariat serves as transitional phase to end exploitation. As a political force, Marxism inspired Russian Revolution, that is Lenin, Maoist China, and shaped socialist movements worldwide. It promised emancipation from alienation, influenced labor rights, and even moderated welfare policies. So that was the positive impact of Marxism. Marxism emphasis on equality and distributive justice made it a powerful emancipatory vision grounded in praxis, the unity of theory and revolutionary action. Now we will go to critical evaluation. Critically, Marxism is faulted for economic determinism. This is one of the very, very important criticism of Marxism, underplaying culture and liberty. The Marxist regime often turned authoritarian, as in Stalin's USSR. So we know, this is again very strong criticism in Marxism. Dictatorship of proletariat is a very kind of, you can say, authoritarian government, which is not conducive to democratic principles, modern democratic principles. Karl Popper denounced its historicism, while later thinkers like Antonio Gramsci, Louis Althusser, and Jürgen Habermas reformulated Marxism to address culture, ideology, and democracy. So these were lacking, so later they modified. Now, conclusion, despite authoritarian distortions, because this is one of the biggest critique of Marxism, Marxism endures as a critique of capitalism and a source of egalitarian ideals influencing contemporary social justice and left politics globally. Now, part C will go, there is no permanent friend or permanent enemy. Discuss this statement in the light of Kautilya's view on sovereignty. So again, 15 marks question, 225 words. So statement from Kautilya has been given and we need to discuss it. Again, discuss means both sides of the positive, negative points you have to evaluate and then try to conclude it. This maxim reflects Kautilya's realist vision of sovereignty. As articulated in the Arthashastra, his famous book, his Rajmandal theory holds that the immediate neighbor is a natural enemy, while the neighbor's neighbor is a natural ally. Yet these identities are not permanent but contingent upon several factors: Artha, Shakti, Anvishiki, so interest, power, and strategic foresight. Sovereignty must be secured through Sam, Dam, Dand, Ved. Conciliation, reward, division, and force. Kautilya thus anticipates the realist school of international relations. So this is Kautilya's view, echoed in Machiavelli, Sprints, Hans Morgenthau's theory of power politics. So these are, more or less similar to Kautilya's theory. And H. Carr's realism, for him, alliances are instruments of state interests, not moral obligations. So this is what Kautilya believes, along with these thinkers also. Now, critically, modern thinkers like Noam Chomsky caution that unchecked realpolitik may legitimize imperialism in the name of interest. While Joseph Nee's theory of soft power, this is very, very important theory, argues that sustainable influence arises from values and legitimacy, not coercion. So this is very, very important. Similarly, Kantian and Rawlsian traditions stress rule-based cooperation and enduring norms. Even in India's practice, doctrines of non-alignment and strategic autonomy show a balance between Kautilyan pragmatism and value-driven diplomacy. Yet, Kautilya's insight remains enduring. In a volatile world, the ruler must remain adaptable, neither emotionally bound nor ideologically rigid. So this is Kautilya's learning, positive learning from Kautilya. Thus, the statement epitomizes his doctrine. Friendship and enmities are strategic, not eternal, in pursuit of sovereign stability. Now we'll go to question 3. Part A, again this question is a 20 marks question and 300 words. Can one's right to life be absolute? Answer with reference to the idea of capital punishment. So again, we have to describe a capital punishment, right to life, pros and cons, and try to conclude. Right to life is universal, and in this we have to give constitutional provisions. We have to also quote various Supreme Court cases because regarding capital punishment, the Supreme Court cases are there. And also we have to give some ethical theories, international thinkers' views. So all those things have to be incorporated in the answer. Now let us see. The right to life is universally regarded as the most basic of rights. For it is the precondition of all others. Yet, philosophy asks whether it can ever be absolute or whether the state may justifiably curtail it in certain cases such as capital punishment. So this is the basic question. In first paragraph, introductory paragraph has been given. Natural right theorists like Locke and Rousseau considered life an inalienable right entrusted to the state for protection, while Thomas Jefferson enshrined it in his doctrine of unalienable rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights also treats life as inviolable. From this standpoint, the death penalty appears inconsistent with the sanctity of human dignity. So this is one view which incorporates a number of thinkers' views and also Universal Declaration of Human Rights. On the other hand, utilitarian philosophers like Bentham and J.S. Mill defend restrictions. If ending one life deters many crimes, overall welfare is served. Immanuel Kant supported capital punishment on grounds of retributive justice. Respecting the criminal as a rational agent entails holding them fully accountable. Kautilya's Arthashastra also likewise endorsed severe punishments, including death, to preserve sovereignty and order. Now, in India, Indian context, particularly present Indian context and constitution, Article 21 guarantees life. But the Supreme Court in Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab, this is one of the very, very important case, landmark case, upheld capital punishment under the rarest of rare doctrine. So this is the Indian position. Through Justice P.N. Bhagwati, he dissented with this view also, called it arbitrary and unconstitutional. He was one of the judges in that bench in 1980. He dissented with this, but the majority view is rarest of rare doctrine. That is, in rarest of rare cases, capital punishment is justified and can be given. Now, critically, abolitions like Caesar Becera, one thinker, he is very, very important thinker, abolitionist like Caesar Beccaria denounced execution as a cruel and ineffective. Amartya Sen stresses that justice must enhance human capabilities, not extinguish them. Noam Chomsky critiques realpolitik while Joseph Nee highlights that durable influence arises from legitimacy, not coercion. The global abolition trend. Now, this again we are going to mention it because from the EU ban to repeated UN moratoriums suggests that moral tide is against capital punishment. In most of the progressive countries, capital punishment has already been abolished. In conclusion, the right to life is not absolute in law, but evolving philosophy and international practice increasingly render capital punishment a morally unsustainable exception. So this is the view, present view, moving humanity closer to treating life as virtually absolute. So this is the concluding view. I will go to third question, part B. How does the reconciliation of opposites take place in the humanism of Tagore? So humanism of Tagore we have to explain, wherein we have to explain how opposites have been reconciled. And since the directive is evaluate, so on the one hand, we have to describe and then we have to critically evaluate that also. So this is again 15 marks question, 225 words. Now let us start. Rabindranath Tagore's humanism sought to harmonize the dualities of life, finite and infinite, individual and universal, matter and spirit, east and west. So all these contradictions have, he tried to reconcile. For him, reconciliation occurs through realization of the infinite within finite, where man transcends ego yet preserves individuality. This vision was embodied in Shantiniketan and Vishwabharati, where Tagore blended Western rationality inspired by Goethe and Wordsworth with individual Indian spirituality, that is Upanishadic insight of Brahma. So basically, a reconciliation between West and East. Education, art, and creativity became means to unite freedom and with discipline. In nationalism, he cautioned against aggressive nationalism, seeking instead cosmopolitan humanism. So this was his view, rooted in culture yet open to universal fellowship. Through love, art, and service, the temporal and eternal merge in a higher synthesis. Now we have to critically, because the directive was to evaluate, so we have to give some critical view also. So critically, his philosophy has been faulted for idealism. B.R. Ambedkar stressed that reconciliation requires structural remedies against caste oppression, not merely spiritual harmony. Gandhi, though sympathetic. So now these are the views of various thinkers against Tagore's reconciliation of different views or different contradictions, or you can say different kinds of ethical views wherein he tries to reconcile. So these are the thinkers' views. pertaining to his, critical evaluation of his view. Thus, while Tagore may have underplayed social and economic realities, his humanism of reconciliation remains a powerful guide for cultural dialogue and universal ethics in today's fractured world. So, his view has not been very cordially accepted by particularly nationalist uh, freedom fighters or thinkers. Gandhi, even though he was sympathetic, prioritized political action over aesthetic unity. Similarly, Amar Sen highlights his pluralism as an antidote to sectarianism, while Martha Nussbaum values his educational ideals for nurturing empathy. Globally, his vision resonates with Martin Buber's dialogical philosophy of relationship. So, even though globally this is a positive development, uh, because his view was more or less as used in a cosmopolitan humanism. So internationally, definitely it has been appreciated, but as far as nationalist thinkers or different critics are concerned, they have not 100% aligned with his view. Now we'll go to C part of question 3. Is it possible to reconcile the concept of development with tribal values? Now, this is again very, very important question, not only from philosophy point of view, but even, you prepare for ethics paper or you prepare for essay paper. So, these kind of questions do have uh, implication of that subject also. So, is it possible to reconcile the concept of development with tribal values to bring social and economic progress? Now, this also again directive to discuss. So, we have to discuss in about 225 words for 15 marks question. So, first thing is we have to answer whether it is possible to reconcile or not, and then accordingly we have to give various reasons for the answer. So conventional model of development emphasizes industrialization, market growth, and urban expansion, while tribal values prioritize community, solidarity, ecological balance, and subsistence living also. The key question is whether these contrasting orientations can be harmonized. So this is basically the question. Now, what can be the answer? Reconciliation is possible if development is redefined. So this is the crux of the answer. Because if development is taken in its traditional form or conventional form, then perhaps reconciliation is not possible. So here, our answer is accordingly reconciliation is possible if development is redefined as human centered well being rather than GDP growth. Amar Sen's capability approach and Mahatma Gandhi's Gram Swaraj both stress dignity, autonomy, and sustainability. Principles resonant with tribal traditions. Constitutional safeguards, now we have to definitely mention some constitutional provisions or statutory provisions uh, which favor or which protect tribal interests. Accordingly, constitutional safeguards such as 5th and 6th schedules, then PISA Act 1996, then Forest Rights Act 2006 attempt to combine modern governance with indigenous self-rule. So these are the statutory and constitutional provisions. Tribal practices like collective resource management and ecological stewardship, parallel global concerns for sustainability. Examples such as community forestry in Odisha, cooperatives in Nagaland show that economic development can coexist with cultural ethos. So now these 2-3 examples, positive examples wherein the economic development has also been achieved and the tribal interests also have been protected. Now we have to critically evaluate this view. Critically, mainstream development has too often meant displacement and cultural erosion. Very Irwin, one of the important thinkers, warned against assimilationist models, while B.R. Ambedkar argued that empowerment requires education and rights. Environmental thinkers highlight that ignoring indigenous knowledge undermines sustainability. Thus, reconciliation is possible when development is dialogical and participatory. So, this is the main concluding answer, or you can say uh, summary of the above, whatever has been said. Treating tribal values not as obstacles but as assets. True progress lies in creative synthesis of tradition and modernity, ensuring both justice and sustainable growth. Now we'll go to question 4. This is the last question of this part, section A. And this again 20 marks question, 300 words. How are both equality and liberty inadequate as social and political ideals without justice? Discuss. So basically, what you have to show is equality, liberty, how these are related with justice, or how equality and liberty can achieve justice, in what conditions can achieve justice. That's what has to be described and discussed. So let us start, because now, even though, I mean, you might have studied equality, you might have studied liberty, so relation between equality and liberty, that's number 1 point. And number 2, how these two ideals, important ideals, are related with justice, that has to be explained here. So liberty and equality are central ideals of political philosophy. Liberty secures individual autonomy, while equality eliminates privileges and discrimination. Yet, pursued in isolation, both are inadequate. Unchecked liberty enables domination, and rigid equality suppresses initiative. The ideal of justice, so this is the important ideal of justice, reconciles these values, balancing freedom with fairness. So basically, just when you start emphasizing justice, it moderates both extreme liberty and extreme equality. And then, I mean, justice is achieved for all parts of the society, all sections of the society. That's what is written here. Classical thinkers recognize this necessity. Plato described justice as a harmony with polity. Aristotle as giving each their due in modern age. John Rawls' theory of justice as a fairness integrates liberty and equality. His first principle ensures equal basic freedom, while the second secures socio-economic fairness through difference principle. So these are two principles of John Rawls, which most of you might have already read it, because this is useful for philosophy, socio-political philosophy, and also for ethics paper. Also, this is very, very important. This has been mentioned here. Amartya Sen's capability approach, it goes one step further than John Rawls. Likewise, emphasizes that liberty and equality gain meaning only when realized through just social arrangements. Now, we have to critically evaluate this whole argument. Critically, justice is not uncontested. Karl Marx, now, as we know, Marxist justice is different from normal justice, argued that liberal justice conceals exploitation achievable only through restructuring property relations. This is what Marx view. Robert Nozick, by contrast, rejected distributive justice as a violation of liberty, defending a minimal state. So another, I mean, extreme view of is of Robert Nozick. Communitarians like Charles Taylor highlighted the need for recognition of cultural identity beyond abstract equality. Historical experiences confirm these critiques. Liberal democracies that prized liberty without justice produced vast inequalities. So historically, we have realized that this is true, while socialist regimes enforcing equality often sacrifice liberty. So both extreme examples we have in the history. So same thing has been quoted here. Now, Indian perspective. In India, the constitutional preamble places justice above liberty and equality. If you have read the preamble, you will know justice above liberty and equality, signaling it as the framework within which both operate. B.R. Ambedkar warned that democracy without social justice would remain hollow, while Mahatma Gandhi argued that liberty and equality must serve the higher goal of moral justice rooted in dignity. Thus, justice is not an adjunct, but the condition of possibility for liberty and equality. Only through justice can liberty avoid degenerating into license and equality into tyranny, ensuring their meaningful realization in social and political life. So basically, this conclusion means simple, that unless liberty and equality both are moderated by justice, I mean, the end purpose of the both will not be served. Now we'll go to part B of fourth question. Can theocracy be accepted as a valid form of government? Give reasons and justification in support of your answer. This is a straight question, but first you have to answer, can theocracy be accepted as a valid form of government, give reasons, and then subsequently you have to give reasons and justification in support of your answer. This is 15 marks question, 225 words. So now let us start. Now first you have to tell what is theocracy. So theocracy is a system where political authority is legitimized by divine sanction and guided by religious leaders or sacred law. So this is theocracy, where political authority is legitimized by divine sanction and guided by religious leaders or sacred law. Historical examples have been quoted include medieval papacy and the Islamic Caliphate, while modern cases include Iran and Vatican City, etc. So these are some examples of theocracy. Now, what supporters say of this view? Supporters argue that theocracy provides moral legitimacy and cultural cohesion by grounding politics in sacred values. Thinkers like Saint Augustine in City of God saw divine authority as the basis of true order. So this is the view of the supporters. Now, what is the modern view and what should be our view? Now, let us try to understand that. However, as a modern form of government, theocracy is deeply problematic. Now, this is our view. Theocracy is deeply problematic. It restricts liberty of conscience, undermines equality by privileging one faith, and obstructs democratic deliberation, since authority rests on revelation rather than reason. So this is modern view. Locke, in letter concerning toleration, argued for separation of church and state. J.S. Mill, another thinker, saw liberty of thought as vital for progress. In India, in the Indian context, if you see, B.R. Ambedkar rejected religious states, warning that Hindu Rashtra would erode democracy, while Mahatma Gandhi upheld Sarv Dharm Sambhav, equal respect for all faiths, as the true foundation of harmony. Now, modern constitutionalism, as in Indian preamble, rests on justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. By subordinating citizenships to faith, theocracy violates these ideals. So now conclusion is, thus, while theocracy may hold historical significance, it cannot be accepted as a valid government in a plural democratic world. Only a secular democratic framework ensures dignity for all citizens. Now this answers the question head on, basically. Now we'll go to fourth question, C part, which is last part of this section. Duties are of nature of obligation, while rights are of nature of entitlement. Therefore, there is no necessary connection between the two. This is a statement given. Do you agree with this statement? This first part. Give reasons and justification for your answer. Now, these simple questions we'll try to start. At first glance, rights and duties appear distinct. Rights are claims or entitlements enjoyed by individuals, while duties are obligations owed to others or society. This separation leads some to argue that two have no necessary connection. Yet, philosophical analysis reveals their intrinsic interdependence. Hoffel's correlativity, this is very, very important. Hoffel's correlativity mapping, if you have seen, you will understand, demonstrates that every right logically implies a corresponding duty. A right to property entails, these examples have been given, a right to property entails others' duty not to trespass. A right to education entails state duty to provide it. So every right has some corresponding duty. For Kant, duties are categorical imperatives, but rights gain moral force only when grounded in duties. Hegel similarly viewed rights and duties as dialectically related within the ethical life. Again, in social contract traditions, Hobbes and Locke tied rights to reciprocal duties of sovereign and citizen. Similarly, Rousseau saw rights as sustained by the collective duty to uphold the general will. Gandhi again radicalized this view by asserting that rights flow from duty well performed. Now, this is Gandhi's view and very, very important. So, critically, not all duties neatly correspond to rights. Civic morality or environmental protection lack precise correlatives, and some rights, such as freedom of conscience, can exist independently. So, this is a critical view. Moreover, history shows that excessive stress on duties without securing rights, as Tocqueville warmed risks legitimizing authoritarianism. Thus, while rights and duties are not identical, they cannot be treated as disconnected. They form a necessary and complementary relationship, sustaining both moral order and social justice. Now, this basically completes the section A of paper 2. In next class, we will try to cover section B of paper 2, which is philosophy of religion. I hope this presentation and this class will be useful for those students who are preparing for particularly next year's exam, and they want to understand how to tackle the actual exam questions. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll meet again in next class. Thank you.